So you've just turned 60, you have $863,000 in your savings, and you're probably wondering, could I retire if I wanted to? Well, that's exactly what we're gonna be breaking down in today's video. I'm a certified financial planner, and for over a decade, I've been in the financial services industry. And during that time, I've helped hundreds of people navigate the questions and the transition from a stressful employment to a worry-free retirement. Most retirees believe they must wait until their mid-60s to retire. This, unfortunately, leads many people to delay their retirement because they don't have the information that they need to discern if they're retirement ready or not. Well, today, not only are we going to run through whether or not someone age 60 with $863,000 can retire or not, but we're going to also step you through the decision-making process so that you can better understand your situation. So with that being said, let's get into the video. Okay, can this person who's 60 retire now? And if not, what compromises would they need to make to do so? So I'm going to lead you through this process, and here we're going to use Jim and Sandra as the example. Their net worth is $1.3 million. He's 60, she's 57. He has $862,000 in his IRA. This was his 401k. And you'll notice that he doesn't have a Roth IRA, and they do not have very much in non-qualified. They have about $23,000 in their joint bank account, and this represents about 6 months of withdrawals from their investments in retirement. And their home is worth $650,000, and they've got a $200,000 loan left on that. And they were fortunate enough to have one of those good loans from the past where it's a 3% interest rate, so they're happy to have that and to stick with it. In terms of their goals for spending, they have two different categories I want to point your attention to. So we have goals and we have expenses. So we're going to just click on goals, and you're going to see that that's vacations. And so that's $5,000 a year in vacations for about 15 years. And then we have expenses. We break that down into a couple of different categories. We want to have the housing outside of the categories that they're thinking about, because houses will be paid off, and so that's going to transition a little bit differently. And we're going to break down healthcare separately, and then we've got living expenses. So what we have is we have vacations, healthcare, and housing separate from what we're thinking about what we can spend on our cell phone bill and groceries and going out to the movies and things like that. So here you can see there's about a $5,000 per month requirement, right? So the total of all these equals $100,000 plus that goal of $5,000, so about $105,000 lifestyle. The reason we like to do this is it's easier to think about, I can spend $5,000 per month after tax, and that doesn't include my housing and my vacations. People can wrap their minds around that rather than taking a lump sum that includes numbers that are going to drop off. Many times people will say, I'm going to be, when I stop working, I'm no longer going to need this because I'm not contributing to my 401k. I'm going to have my house paid off pretty soon. So it's an easier number to wrap your head around. And at first glance, and don't be discouraged at this point, it's a little bit disappointing because we can see here that Jim and Sandra are out of money at 71 years old. So they start here and it quickly goes down. And then you'll notice that there's all these different dials that we can mess with. And I want to lead you through the process of thinking that may help them to kind of get a clearer picture. So they notice something's amiss, and I don't want you to be startled yet. I'm going to walk you through the process of evaluating what types of compromises might they make or changes might they make. So the first thing people go to is their spending. I'm not saying that I would recommend that, but let's just say for argument's sake, if we're going to absolutely retire now, so for Jim, it'd be at the end of this year, let's just reduce that down by $1,000 a month, so $12,000 a year. We're going to just see what does that do to our outcome. We can notice that it doesn't really improve it that much. And then we might look at, well, we're both taking Social Security at 62. What if Jim were to wait a little bit longer and take his at 67 instead? And let's go ahead and refresh that, and let's see, what does that do? You can see that it does improve it just a little bit, right? But not enough to make a big difference. So we're going to go ahead and start, and we're going to look at the vacation goal for a second. This is 15 years of vacations. So let's just get radical for a second, and let's just take that down to 0 and see if this was a compromise that would make it suitable. I'm not saying that they should do this. This is just something that they're thinking about. And then we notice that even with being as severe of taking the vacations away, it really doesn't make that plan good enough to feel like they could retire now. So then we're going to look at allocation. So we want to look at how are they invested, because we know inflation is an issue and we know that your portfolio needs to support your goals. So we're going to go ahead and look at their investments real quick. We're going to pay attention to the left side here. And what we noticed is that, we know inflation is going to be over 3%, and that's built into the plan. And they've got a lower amount of stocks, of equities, okay? And so they're targeting a 4.6% return. And I want to contrast that with potentially going a little more moderate, having maybe say 60% of their money in equities. and targeting a return that's 7.5%. Again, we're not saying that we're trying to beat the market or do anything crazy. We're just saying we want the long-term return to kind of reflect what stocks with a combination of bonds would look like if we had a little bit more equities in our portfolio. And so we're going to go ahead and just test that. And so we're going to take that current allocation, we're going to go ahead and reallocate it to a moderate portfolio, and we're going to refresh, and we're going to see how would this make an impact. Right away, we can see this is probably one of the more significant things that Jim and Sandra can do is make sure their portfolio is outpacing inflation. Because now we can see that their money lasts quite a bit longer, probably still not acceptable enough. So we've got a couple other options. We could work part-time job, and I want to point out something else, which is the retirement spending. Now, I'm going to click on this and you're going to see that there's a couple of different choices. We've got inflation adjusted, spending smile, stages, guardrails, floor, and ceiling. So retirement spending is a strategy that makes a difference. And so most people's financial planning software is inflation adjusted, where if you want to spend $80,000 a year, it's going to be $80,000 plus inflation the next year. And then it's going to take that number, let's just say it's $82,000 for easy conversation, and then it's going to say the next year after that, it's going to be $82,000 plus inflation. So it simulates going up every single year. Well, the problem with that is that people don't really spend money like that, right? They actually spend a little bit more when they're earlier in retirement, and then as we go through retirement, we spend less, and at the end of retirement, it kind of pops back up. So one of the things we can do is we can say, well, what if we were to more accurately show that type of spending? And I'm going to show you what the retirement spending smile looks like on top of this, and let's just see if we were a little more accurate in our modeling, what that might do. So we're going to go from inflation adjusted to the spending smile, and we're going to click on refresh. We're going to look at this value here. Right? We can see now that definitely the two big things would be allocation and the retirement spending strategy. And I won't do this in this video, but I want to make sure I throw this out there. I often talk about the spending smile and guardrails as a combination being kind of what I think is like the ultimate spending strategy. And so right now I'm just showing you what just adding the spending smile to their plan can do for them. Okay, so we've made a couple of changes. We can see it's definitely looking more likely. And now we could say, well, what if I worked part-time for 5 years? And so what this is doing is it's saying when Jim retires, he works part-time for 5 more years. And so let's just say that he were to accept a fraction of what he normally makes. Okay. Now, so this means he could be shopping for a job, and he could say, well, there's somebody that's willing to pay me $50,000 a year, and it's a lot less stress. And would that make a big difference? We're going to go ahead and do 5 years of part-time work and see what happens. So here we can see that 5 years of part-time work makes a really big difference. So he might use this to consider working a job that he's never even been in before. It might be $30,000, whatever it is. He can use this to kind of help him negotiate with himself if he wants to do a phased retirement or not. So then he starts to say, well, what if I did that? Could I still spend my original amount of money that I want to spend? So we're going to go ahead and increase our spending back up by $12,000 a year. We can see, okay, it definitely puts a little more stress on the plan. There's not a lot of money left over. In fact, there's none. So that's a compromise we may not want to make. So we also would ideally like to have those vacations in there. So we're going to kind of do one more thing, and this is just based on what Jim and Sandra want to see. We're going to put those vacations back in there, and we're going to say, okay, this is if we're working part-time, and that really doesn't do justice for us. And now we're going to say, well, what if we're not working part-time, but instead of retiring now, what if I worked 2 more years? So if I retired at 63, making my full income. Okay, so that makes it quite a bit different. And what if I just worked that 1 extra year? Okay, and so he goes through this process, and we see that 1 extra year. All right, so this combination of working part-time to phase my retirement, or working an extra year or 2. And why is that? Well, we're contributing to our 401k. We're making a lot more money than we would make at a part-time job. We're shortening the timeline of years that we're planning for in retirement. All right, so if Jim and Sandra want to spend that extra $1,000 per month, then they're gonna lean towards a combination of working a part-time job, or maybe pushing that retirement out an extra year or 2, because you gotta keep in mind, they're also covering that extra healthcare during those couple of years before Medicare kicks in. However, I've been surprised, and some people may find, well, I overestimated that $5,000 per month. I really only need $4,000. And instead of doing vacations for 15 years, I'm just going to do them for 10 years. And a lot of times people will find, and even surprise us, that they would rather have that earlier retirement and make those couple of compromises rather than work those extra couple of years. But I gotta say, it is tempting to work those extra couple of years. But they're definitely gonna wanna fix that allocation. They don't have enough equities. Remember, a retiree's time horizon should be 25 plus years. And unless you are liquidating your portfolio in 5 years or so, you should be planning on that larger time horizon. Just because you retire doesn't mean that you have to go ultra conservative because inflation is an issue. They've also got their emergency savings in place that they need. They've got some choices they can make with Social Security. And so there are options that they can be manipulating to kind of find what's best for them. Remember, the most important thing that you can do is to get your financial story down so that you can figure out which options you have and you can be working towards your goals. And as always, it's very important to make sure these things come to pass. So as you discover what those options are, we like to write those down onto a one-page financial plan so that you're able to make sure that those things happen, because if they don't happen, then we can't trust what we're looking at when we're doing a financial plan. We need to write these things down so that we actually make these changes. Now you know someone age 60 with $863,000 would need to do in order to retire now. You can understand whether you too are ready to make that jump into your next chapter. However, there are unique factors that will apply to your situation that I have not been able to cover in this video. So if you want to understand if you are retirement ready or if you have any questions about retirement, click the link in the description for a no-cost consultation with my team. See you in the next video.